Hello, Internet. My name is John Matos. Welcome, Matt, again to the show.
Hey, John, how you doing?
um, so, I have some notes here to kind of get us rolling. You had kind of commented about my reaction to the recent post by Edwin of the of Mike uh, from a Lone Stars fame. Um,
Yeah.
and
Edwin Boyette and Mike Miller
uh,
chatting as they normally do. Yeah,
And I appreciate also you sending me the video he just did about different crowdfunding things. And
yeah,
I think I'll kind of get into what um my experience has been with the I guess non book gate to
yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
explain
It's
what
important.
my reaction was to that. But first, I'm interested in you kind of giving some background as to how, because I saw you had a little wrench next to your name in one of Mike's streams. So I was like, oh, so I guess he's a moderator. But I had experience with seeing different people that have been kind of following different influencers, and they kind of become moderators in their streams sometimes. Um, and So I was wondering if that had come about from just like the amount of, if that's like an automatic thing when you stay in a stream for long enough, or if that's something that like Mike had to contact you about and like set you up for, and if that had something to do with um, getting into crowdfunding in terms of like you got to know people through that chat, so they kind of followed you to your Indiegogo, and um, yeah,
Yeah.
just give me all your your brain juice about all that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those people that know me, they know that um, I'm not a side picker usually when it comes to drama.
Mhm.
The only side I'm picking is uh, with those who produce, I guess. And I guess that
Mhm.
gets me in trouble. But I do try to hang out with people that are interested in talking and making the comics primarily. And I find those people on all sides of whatever conflict of the week happens to be going on. So I will be in their chat sometimes. And generally, I mean, it's as simple as they probably have seen me a bit in their chat, but for the
Mhm.
most part, they're aware that I have a campaign going on, and in order to post a link, you have to be a moderator
Mhm.
to limit spam of links. So
Okay.
they just give me mod status just so that I can be able to post a
Oh,
Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign. So that's
mm.
it. So I'm not in any inner circle. I just
Oh, right.
yeah,
And I think that that's something that I want to touch on, is that people kind of have different preconceived notions. Like what comes to mind for me specifically is that um, I used to listen to a lot of um, like when pop punk was big back in the early 2000s.
hmm.
I was
Pop punk, is that
into,
what it was called? I'm trying to
yeah,
like
I'm thinking of like Green Day,
okay,
um,
yeah.
Blink 182, Good Charlotte, that type of thing.
Oh sure, yeah.
And there's a lot
Some of
of
that
that,
emo stuff.
right? There's a lot of that well, first of all, I'm laughing because it's definitely a guilty pleasure of mine. But that community, like, there was a lot of this feeling like when pop punk happened that, oh, this is, because this is melodic, because this is not noisy, and the people aren't wearing like grungy clothes and things like that, that the industry was being like diluted somehow. And so I feel like there's
Interesting.
some of that thinking around the publishing industry where there's a lot of these very strong voices, and so when you are like, when you say you go to a convention to see so and so, and there's some of that kind of like what is now largely being referred to as identity politics happening
Mm,
when kind of associating yourself with certain um, people and certain trends. Um, and I'm interested because of how, you know, we both have this interest in creativity as this like, cathartic. Like I saw from your channel that were at least interested in exploring what um you know how it can escape be something that is healthy. um and I'm certainly also somebody that thinks along those lines.
mm,
um
mhm.
like how much escape can you actually do? And
Especially, I guess, in light of the context of uh, maybe escapist forms of entertainment becoming popular, I guess, and important
and
in pop
and I
culture.
think,
That kind
I
of.
don't know if you want to give some context to the what might have been. It's really up to you how much of the specific instances of drama that you want to maybe go into, but
Yeah.
I think that the a question that I kind of have been circling is about how much of that is necessary to um, distinguish yourself from another voice. So you do this work of saying, I this is an opinion that I have, and then we have this cultural thing now where, okay, you can say that you're in, for example, when I went to promote a comics anthology, or I guess you could say like it was more like a zine where there was illustration and short
Hmm.
story and different things.
Hmm.
Um, it was under the banner of something called Graphically Christian, and
Hmm.
I kind of had this thinking around, I don't want to necessarily be, hiding the fact that I'm a Christian, and I'm doing this with somebody from my church, and we both are what you would call evangelical.
Hmm.
So this is kind of like a statement that we're making. Um, and some conventions, were suspicious, I guess, of that, and I didn't you don't I didn't even necessarily hear back from when I applied for a table. Others, you know, there's kind of this idea of like, anyone who pays is accepted, and so you don't necessarily get any kind of information from when you apply that. But um,
Yeah, sure.
it is. I guess I could ask: is there something around this comic thing that you think you've learned, not necessarily as a axiom, but something that behooves you in doing crowdfunding, without trying to stay away from that type of categorical thinking?
Well, first of all, I'm going to turn off. I feel like my camera is flickering, so I'm going to try and
Oh,
fix
sure
that
thing.
for a second. If I can't fix it, I may have to turn off the video. Is that okay? It's not flickering anymore.
Uh,
Okay, so that's probably better. I don't know what was going on there. Hmm. Well, hmm. I guess I come from a classical liberal type bent, I suppose.
mhm.
I feel like the '90s was beaten into me, and I don't think it's easy to beat that out of me again.
Uh,
So I feel like everyone has. I don't particularly buy this. I don't buy the idea of pure escapism. I don't buy the idea of just quote unquote normal entertainment, or like everyone trying to like just assume that everyone understands what the center point of culture is supposed to be, I guess.
Uh-huh.
But I do buy into the idea that everyone can make content that they're passionate about, that motivates them, that has a message that rings rings true for them,
Mhm.
and can be freely put out into the marketplace and agreed with or disagreed with, I guess,
Mhm.
respectfully, regardless of the content. And so I suppose that's what's always attracted me more to DIY comics to begin with,
Mhm.
and even kind of like anthologies. I love the idea that I could just pick up one book, like Kazu Kibuishi's Flight series, and get like 16 short stories from people of very different perspectives, telling stories that were meaningful to them. That I'm getting a lot of uh, diversity in every sense of that term, I guess.
Mhm.
Uh, you know what I mean?
Right.
Worldview
Right.
diversity as well. And just everyone is invited to the table of this the public space, I guess.
Mhm.
So me minimizing uh, like deeply held rational uh, self-definitional uh, concepts like being a Christian would be contrary, like forfeiting that and the things that come with being a Christian, forfeiting those things in order to be successful in the public sphere is not an option. But
Mhm.
also, um, I suppose I'm not evangelical. It's probably a Presbyterian thing, but I don't think that the public sphere is the Christian sphere per se. I don't think it's anyone's sphere. So I'm not trying to set. That's another thing that I think allows me to hopefully, I think, kind of operate a little more successfully or a little more cool headedly than other people and than other Christians, honestly, in the public sphere,
Mhm.
when that's with people who aren't performing to what I would consider to be Christian standards or moral standards or something of that sort. It doesn't
Mhm.
bother me when non-Christians don't act like Christians, if that sort of
Mhm.
makes sense. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
expecting them
think
to.
that's
So
an interesting point to bring up, that the
yeah.
because it's something I've been learning about God's nature recently, that
Mm.
um I had attributed previously to a uh, uh, specifically human one. And it's something that I feel like I've very unsuccessfully attempted to do with the White Devil. I guess you could call it a preview right now. That's on Tapastic, in
Yeah.
the sense that there's that evidence problem that we've talked about previously,
Mm.
and some people interpret that as, I need to go and make this a Christian space, and
Mm.
like in terms of physical reality, I'm going to speak somewhere, and this space better remain Christian in every sense of the word. Like, people better be acting Christian, and like, it's kind of a weird thing if you're saying, I'm going to go to this public forum, then that's not necessarily that your goal spiritually, if you're being led by the Spirit, is to you know transform people into Christians, as if it was a. But that's why I was kind of using the alchemy metaphor with some of the
Oh,
writing, is
okay.
that like you're being a Christian scientist, but in the medieval sense, but as that
Oh,
like
I like
you can make like
it.
a chemical change to them. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so
Yeah. Hey, can I
yeah.
can I interject? Like,
Oh, sure.
so growing up, I grew up Unitarian,
Mm,
and I found a lot. this is going to probably surprise some people, but and then Unitarian and then Methodist, and both of those spheres are are saturated, I think, with that same viewpoint, but just from a different political persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
That you don't have to be Christian, but we're gonna do our damnedest to make sure that you act exactly like one, according to how we define that. So accepting Christ is very optional, but earning goodness, performing the good works so that you get rewarded here and in the hereafter is something that we're going to enforce. We're enforcing that dominion now, and we have inquisitors to make sure that you're keeping up with that. And that's the gospel of Unitarianism and Methodism. That's been my experience. Maybe other people have different experiences. Sorry, I just hit the mic. But
no problem.
So when I say, like, I shrink back from calling myself an evangelical, it's not from not liking the good news, the evangelion, and it's not also from being afraid of conservatives or Democrats per se, but just seeing a lot of dominion cultural politics at play, I guess, from both sides. And so I don't really, again, like, I don't see it as a left-right thing. I see it as a dominion versus liberty thing. And I think scripturally, the description of this, the way Jesus viewed the situation and the way I think we're meant to see it in this age is more in the liberty persuasion. Or if there is dominion, it's within the church. If there's discipline, it's within the church of people who are already voluntarily opting in to this community. If they are opting out of this community, we don't have we're not supposed to be telling them what to do per se. You are first in. You first have a status, and then you have a thing to do within that status. If that makes sense. If you don't have, if you're deciding, if you're self-identifying as not Christian, then we don't have Christian things for you to be doing. If that sort of makes sense. I feel like that's getting really theological. Well, I don't know if you wanted me to go there, but
as the more historically evangelical one in the chat right now, I'll close this thing by saying that, like, personally, I feel like there is a kind of like falsification loop within within a lot of Christian thinking, where there's this that Christ needs to be the terminus to a lot of this conflict. Like, he is the final scapegoat in every conflict. So the idea that everything needs to be a battle that you put upon yourself to win is a lot of denying the Spirit the opportunity to work beyond, the limits that you artificially set for yourself. So that's the end of specifically theology talk. If you're interested in more complex, blog posts like this, you could just follow me on Twitter. I have it in the description, and you can find. I think also, if I'm correct, I have 10 emails that I can, 5 of which are kind of already accounted for, but 5 of which might go to the 5 first people that follow me on Twitter.
Good idea.
And
nice.
I've been kind of using the Strider Talk account, or Strider Co account, that we have on ThinkSpot, to go into how some of these different stories that I encounter, be it movies, books, comics, lead me to think about these problems in a in more of a complete way. I think it was Paul C. Maxwell on um, on the ThinkSpot stream that I have that said that theology is the robust version of history. Um, and
Mm,
as a historical fiction writer, um, that really kind of spoke to me on a very deep level. Um,
interesting.
so to get back to some of this stuff in terms of marketing,
Yeah.
um, I wanted to kind of let you have the floor a bit in kind of making your case for uh, crowdfunding, because I personally feel like that is very encapsulating of something that's working now, that's making specifically marketing entertainment something that's immediate. Like this is a product
Mm.
that's going up, and you're building hype for it. Um, but go into some of the things that attracted you to crowdfunding, um, and then I'll see if I can pack the rest of the show with filler.
Well, I mean, I guess it's nice. I like the meritocratic feel of crowdfunding, where I mean, not to say that going to a traditional publisher isn't meritocratic, but I don't have to ask permission uh, to get get people to buy a book. I guess if that sort of makes sense. I only have to ask permission, basically from the customer, which is nice.
Mm,
But I think the phenomenon, like what I've come to learn about marketing, and
mhm,
I think this is particularly important since 2018,
mm,
is um, I'm going to say I've talked about it a little bit on other streams the past few days, so I feel like I'm still kind of letting it crystallize. Hopefully, I can just kind of nail it this time. But human beings want the most human centric marketing they can find, and they will gravitate. Uh, it's like a sliding scale. They will find whatever spectrum of marketing you provide them. They're going to find the one that's most extremely to heavily oriented towards the human centered version of that. And by human centric or human centered, I just mean like that they're getting to know the creator the most, that they're
mm,
getting to know that it feels like that they're getting the most interaction. It's an interactive marketing.
mhm,
So live streams where they can at you, super chats are cool. They can be
mhm,
in the comments. They can follow you on Twitter and see your thoughts throughout the day.
mhm,
Um, uh, yeah, and video more than social media is important for that. And if
mhm,
you just look at like Indiegogo, for instance, I mean, I was kind of shocked, and that's why one of the reasons why I shared Edwin's video with you. I mean,
mhm,
he's a numbers guy, and it says a lot. I mean, there's nothing even really controversial here, but
mhm,
the, the top people from last year and this year, he was talking about this year, but obviously last year too,
mhm,
for crowdfunding on Indiegogo at least, which is like 25% of the size of comics crowdfunding, the rest being to Kickstarter. But those are all YouTubers or big regular guests on YouTubers. So that's that high interactive human um, marketing at
mhm,
work that is very successful. And I suppose, like looking through Kickstarter, it is a bit of an older approach to marketing, but those people, if you do a bit more digging, you generally find that they have a great Webtoons presence, or they've got a lot of different things going on where they're interacting with people. They have a big uh, they have like a networked relationship with their fans and readers,
mm,
and again, and I guess like they're able to do that even more being outside of traditional uh, publishing situations, so they can engage people more directly and
mm,
have kind of off the radar sort of relationships with folks that people rightly can um, rightly guess that people rightly realize are more authentic, I guess, than the sort of stuff that they've been used to in years past. So I think it's kind of interesting. It's almost like the media, the bandwidth on the internet has actually kind of outpaced our ability to really keep up with what we want to do with that bandwidth. So there's so much video media now. Even
Right.
5 years ago, podcasting used to be a big way to get the word out on who you were, for people to get to know what your thoughts were on crowdfunding or books or writing or drawing or, you know, the life of an artist. All that's gone away. That's obliterated because of video. And I think just like settling on this, one of the reasons why I'm excited about, and this goes with Comicsgate, but just indie comics in general. I think what's really excited is the chaos of, and again, this isn't a left-right thing, but there's folks who were more comfortable in the older formats that allowed them more control because it was a pre-recorded approach to being vulnerable and being, being yourself on podcasts and things of the sort. I know you still, no, I'm not throwing any shade to podcasts, but and I still listen to podcasts.
Yeah,
But,
I won't bite you. That's fine.
no, yeah, but there's something very frightening and chaotic and overly immediate with live streaming, especially doing that regularly and letting people get to know you on that level, and you get to know them on that level. That people who enjoy that sort of openness, that sort of I'm not sure where this is going to go feel, are succeeding very well with that. And people who are hesitant about that, people realize people who watch videos know what a hesitant live streamer looks like, I guess, and they'll move
Well,
on. And
I would
so
say
I just think it's
that
interesting.
it. I definitely agree that there's a little bit of a reticence, especially considering, like, I do um, kind of mid, what was the term, upmarket fiction, and my sister is very steeped in, like, the historical medieval uh, side of fantasy, and making sure things are lining up right. So
Yeah,
when I
sure.
was kind of helping her think about marketing, I had a document that I made for her, and I'm gonna share the screen so I can kind of walk people through
Oh,
um,
neat.
what my synthesis of that was. So, all right. So, I wanted to kind of help her think about, okay, so you have this very esoteric thing that you think is the best aspect of your fiction. Um, you don't necessarily think of um, somebody like Dan Brown having his own live stream. Like, there are certain types of things that you don't readily associate with an esoteric voice. So I kind of wanted to give her a few different things based on how media has changed, and some of my own investigation into that, to kind
Oh,
of give
neat.
her a baseline to choose from, and to kind of just get her in the ballpark of certain media trends. And so one person that also kind of has an esoteric interest that was making a really big effect on the gaming sphere was Brooke Lay, who goes by Dodger. She's one of the people that was a part of the what was the company? So she was on um, the Game Station podcast, and
Sounds familiar.
that would eventually become Polaris, which really, like, used her a lot as a on-camera account. Um, but one of the shows that she did on her personal channel was about like different tropes across media, and
Mm-hmm.
like for example, like she really liked foxes. She was very much into the fox mythos of East Asia, and uh, there were tons of like
Interesting.
Greek mythic things and all those things that she wanted to kind of talk about. So um, she eventually developed a show called Welcome to the Fandom, and it was just kind of a way of talking about mythology, fables, and sci-fi fantasy tropes. Um, and one thing that I thought was interesting with her was that she had gone through the multi-channel network era where she was, just looking to be talent, and so she went from like doing spreadsheets at um, Polaris to being the face of the company,
Yeah,
and
sure.
the main person that was delivering and producing a lot for them, and then come to know once she um, got to where she wanted to be, where she was making enough money with her own crowdfunding things, and she also started a company uh, based off her, you know, personal brand association with coffee. Um, she just, you know, was not associated with Polaris anymore, and was just living off of all of that like passive income.
Very
So it
nice.
was a good example of somebody that was, had their own business goals and, worked to kind of achieve that, and make that work for them as a personal brand. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of put her in the category of like influencer. She used a lot of those social media channels, like YouTube and Twitter and others to like use her personality as the draw for her
Mm.
brand.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's really key. This is pretty recently, right? Her
uh,
claim to
yeah,
fame.
yeah.
Yeah.
Polaris, I think, was 20 like 2000, maybe 2009 to,
Mm-hmm.
oh well, probably okay. No, I'm giving them too much credit. Um, Yeah, because that Polaris, her being the face of Polaris took a little while. The Game Station, I think, was around 2009, and then she got featured on the Co-optional podcast. That was a big part of that brand. And I'm blanking on the name. The company changed names in between the Game Station and Polaris. Um, but there was just that time when you know there was this opportunity for her to be connected to the fans that she knew she wanted to reach, and she was willing to try different things to reach those fans. And I thought it was a good way of showing that like what was meaningful to her was connecting to those people. And
Mm.
so it was, even though she had this kind of like all these varied interests, be it gaming or like these uh, maybe like the coffee company was definitely like a thing that she thought she wanted to do, like was to be her own business owner that way and make merchandise. um
Yeah.
it was kind of an example of somebody that had that dynamic personality and used it to uh, get their business goals done. And she used her face, her personality, to be a prosumer, which uh, is kind of it's an interesting word within fandom because a lot of people associate it with kind of like this culture vulture mentality of,
Mm.
are you a girl gamer? Like, are you just in
Mm.
this, because you're trying to jump on a trend to promote yourself? Is this like some kind of immoral, quandary that you're getting into? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I feel like I could definitely see that there were strains of her content that were specifically helping her to get uh, embedded in people's minds what type of personality she was, and that was kind of the driving force for her.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
is there anything else you want to say before I move on to the next one?
No, I think that's um, hmm. I think that's been the model for maybe for the social media age of the past 10 years. That's the model success story, more or less, I think.
Mm,
I'd say that's been the traditional uh, ladder to success, is the way
mhm.
you're describing it, I think.
And I think that there are probably, like, John Green is a good example for publishing that
Hmm.
I there's this kind of like dichotomy in my mind that maybe there are authors that have, personalities that just didn't reach out to me, that didn't grab me enough to include them, because the other two in this example are authors. Um,
Hmm.
and or there's this idea that maybe um, there is this kind of thing with, if you're thinking of an influential author, most of the time you might associate that with a nonfiction author, and that was certainly something that I'll get into if we have time, about my assessment of Christian fiction, or modern, esoteric classic, you know, literary fiction.
Sure.
That was something that I wasn't necessarily interested or attached to finding like a cult of personality to join, and so there was a lot of that very conservative fundamentalist in me that was like fighting whether if I get your thing, am I just getting what you think? Because I'd rather get what like I'd rather have an opportunity to be an active reader, and
Yeah.
that it kind of feels like a lot of the modern celebrity as author discussion was trending more in that direction. Um,
Yeah, that's fair.
um, but I wanted to contrast the influencer with somebody that's a maverick. I chose Shayna McGuire is a fantasy author that Melissa had read. Um, and largely got her following just by going to conventions and doing what's called folk music.
Yeah.
It's this kind of fun genre where you're taking folk uh, sensibilities in terms of sound with your music, but you're infusing sci-fi and fantasy tropes, and like you would do like
Really
joke songs. Yeah, you can do
interesting.
like more esoteric forms where you basically whip out some, version of Greensleeves that's like your favorite jam. And it's an interesting thing that goes on at a lot of like specifically sci-fi fantasy conventions, that Melissa had found through the Society for Creative Anachronism. Um, and I wanted to kind of show her an example of somebody that did Vilk, and to show her, because that was kind of something she thought of as, okay, I can promote my bard. Well, this is what Melissa said. Um, I can promote my bard character by just cosplaying as the character and doing
That's
music,
fun.
right?
Yeah,
And
that's a maverick
so,
approach.
right, and what this kind of is an interesting mixture of is she nonstop wrote, like Shannon was very um, prolific in the sense that she was amassing good writing before even starting to um, make that decision of getting into the business, getting into this industry, and it paid off because one of her, um, songwriting, uh, you know, her songwriting and her music is largely fan driven. She put out a
Mm.
video, and I put here that one of the re-uploads of her song have more, you know, video views than um, like actual Penguin Random House interviews
Wow.
that were uploaded.
Yeah.
Um, and
Of
so
her.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like this live performance that was done at a convention also has more views than that publisher putting that on their sacred YouTube page. Um, and so I felt like uh, this is a good example of somebody that uh, is you know piercing the veil of um, hero fantasy. She's taking on this established commercial, um, you know all this kind of like uh, trends that are happening, and bringing this esoteric type of music, and just finding the people that she knew were going to enjoy her brand of fiction, and did
Mm.
did the work to appeal to them. And it wasn't necessarily about growing some kind of following based on her political views, based on her philosophy. It was more
Yeah.
focused around her artistic vision, and banking on the fact that there would be people that would be interested in that. And so that's kind of what I'm characterizing as this maverick approach of um, understanding
Hmm.
that you might have something worth saying, and then just relying on, um, maybe I'll write this and submit it to a established, literary contest, and there will be enough people that follow whatever that, you know, arbitrary gatekeeper is, and they'll take that person's word for it. Um, and so I kind of feel this as a middle ground, because you might be under the impression that a maverick just doesn't care what the people think, and obviously
Yeah.
if you want a following, you have to care about what that potential following is interested in. Um,
Yeah.
but I feel like the Maverick is not necessarily as focused on a personality driven brand as much as they are having that voice speak for their um, speaks for itself, and expressing the kind of what they want to express, and then letting the chips fall where they may.
Can I ask a question? So she's an author, right? But she's known
Correct.
for
Yeah.
her music. That's that's neat. See, I guess that's still it's neat how these are two different ways of being um, human accessible. I guess
Uh huh.
like she's being accessible from her creativity. Like you're still getting a sense of her personality
Hmm.
and who she is. Like you're building a connection with her, but it's just a different dimensional approach, I guess,
Right.
which I
And,
really like. It's
and
clearly different from the first
I,
way.
right. Yeah. And I'm glad you're affirming it, because there is this kind of um, contradiction in terms that you could make for yourself if you wanted to, if you were dead set on despairing of, well, I'm not as discoverable as this person who has
Yeah,
30,000 followers on this thing. Well, they're the type of person who would appeal to people that are interested in looking at someone's pretty picture on Instagram. There's different ways of communicating,
yeah,
and there are people that prefer to put the art first, and 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 connect that way. It's still making a connection, but it is making a connection through a adjacent. I guess that was actually a term
That's a good word. Yeah.
that Dodger has also used, and I think it behooved her as well, that there's like these strains of art that are also, interesting to the people that you might want to market a certain other product to. And so
Yeah.
if you think of, okay, I'm making this piece of art, it's not mercenary to, um, divide and conquer. I'm just going to take some more time and devote that to making this other piece of art that will funnel people to this other thing that I might be, more passionate about. Maybe some days I'll be passionate about, this other form. Um, but but yeah, it is an interesting thing. Is an interesting choice to kind of double down. Um, and I think Melissa's and me to some extent as well. We're both interested in um, multiple projects at once. Um,
Sure.
I've done freelancing with graphic design, and sometimes I've done that for things that are like fandoms that are adjacent. Um, and sometimes, they're to get the bills paid, and I'm using those skills to do that. Um, but there's a sense in which God's made us with these um, inherent abilities, and you funneling towards
Hmm.
another a goal of subsistence is still um, a it's a way of continuing to express those uh, gifts where and sometimes that results in getting your passion project in front of more eyes than would not have otherwise. um,
Hmm.
but I think it's a way that authors like Shannon have um, put put more than one strength forward in order to achieve um, a goal in the publishing industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it.
And then this is the one that I thought most correlated with yourself. Um,
Hmm.
and this is an author who Madeline Miller wrote Song of Achilles. Circe is another um, more modernist fantasy work, and it's a very literary. Melissa and I have had mixed feelings about it, but certainly she was able to amass quite a following based on doing modern takes on esoteric works. Um, but I feel like this is more of a cerebral um, type of creator, in that there was a certain eye that she had towards a um, a certain amount of credibility, and
Hmm.
making um, making sure she did her due diligence to make a and it's kind of what I'm advertising Strider as, in the sense that
Yeah.
you want your second world to feel like it is accurate. And to some people who don't write, that sounds like you're insane. Um, but
Hmm.
there are certain creators where you want there to be some type of lived-in feeling. Um, and I think one example of that everyone knows is Bloomsbury Publishing. Um, was the publisher that found Harry Potter in 1997, and it's a famous
Hmm.
story of that. She got J.K. Rowling got tons of rejections, but uh, another reason I put the publisher as uh, um, a resource that the author can use is that there are certain um, types of fiction wherein you might require a gatekeeper to kind of vouch for your capability in a certain dimension. And
Certainly.
so historical fiction can be one example. If you get um, you know, a imprint of one of the big five, or you have somebody like Bloomsbury who was not a big publisher and then found Harry Potter. That was a mutual um, thing where that made gangbusters, and it exploded both the creator and the publisher, because there was this feeling that J.K. Rowling was tapping into something about fantasy that was unique, that had not been done to that threshold beforehand. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Can I say, like, I do think it is interesting. There are upsides to gatekeeping and gatekeepers,
mm,
and one of those is that conferred credibility
mm,
that the gatekeeper can bestow. People get frustrated with that sort of thing because it's inherently limiting the pool of, you know, those entering the gate, but it actually makes for it makes the customer's life easier, I suppose,
mhm.
because you just have to you as the gatekeeper have to just earn credibility, and then you can expect that the customer has, uh, with their higher trust in you, can uh, I guess you have better listenability,
Mhm.
which I think is interesting because there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of creative endeavors vying for your attention, and so it's actually an efficient way to get to for you as a consumer to find something that you like. You just have to find the publisher
Right.
that consistently puts stuff out, or and so it yeah. I do think, I mean, it's inevitable. It's always with us, and it's there for a reason, because
Mhm.
it does simplify the credibility game
Mhm.
for both creator and consumer.
Mm. But yeah, but to piggyback on what you're saying, there was not this was not without controversy. So there was
Mm.
the Los Angeles Times wrote that Miller was considered a dark horse to win the Orange Prize for fiction.
Wow.
However, Paste listed Miller's work as one of the top, uh, one of the 40 best novels of the 2010s. Um,
Wow.
so so there's and she's also going to get a HBO series. Um, but there's some of that that comes across as arbitrary. There's this idea, it's like, oh well, this gatekeeper said this about you, this one said this, and there's this sense in which no one of these is uh, has achieved the singularity and is the voice of uh, the beyond or something. There's this idea
Yeah.
that you want there to be some kind of uh, rubber stamped thing, and there's not going to be any other credible source that's going to try to tear down your credibility. Um, but there is a sense in which you, getting some people that you trust on your side, that you respect, and that respect your abilities to create, that does give some of um, that benefit of the doubt um, to the reader. Like, oh, if that reader is worth their salt, they can judge. Oh, this publisher puts out this type of work. Oh, great! I can trust that they're going to deliver this good product to me. And it's difficult for some. I say this as somebody that chose to self-publish my first novel, um, to think of
Mm-hmm.
that as something that is not necessarily, it's a lot of painful months and years for most authors to get that kind of approval. Um, but there might be some of you out there that need to, wait and find a specific um, partner that you're willing to make out there in the industry. Um, there are a couple that I
Yeah.
found recently that I'm considering in terms of um, as I personally work on refining my voice as an
Mm.
author, um, and I'm interested in how the independent publishing boom has allowed for some of those to be more diverse than they would have been prior.
Yeah. 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 Those are three. Oh, I think John just exited himself from the show. That is very doable when you use StreamYards. Those of you who don't know, uh, StreamYards, it's very modular. There's these little boxes that run around the sides, and it's easy to X out of one too many of them.
Oh,
And he's back. There we go. Yep. Yep. That's easy to do. But fortunately,
uh,
it's easy to get back in. So,
did I miss anything good?
nope. Nope.
Okay.
I tread water for us both. It was good.
Okay. Um, so with our oh, I think I'll hold this for later, but I feel like uh the Bookgate problem um could definitely make for its own uh episode topic. Um,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
but I think we did a lot of good work here. Is there any kind of closing comments you'd like to make before we sign off?
I think those are three very interesting approaches. It's really nice. It's great that you already had them researched so you could share them. um, I think just for a teaser for next time, whenever we do a Bookgate talk,
Hmm.
um, I feel like the metaphor for me, I'm always trying to figure out what metaphor fits this. It's when like you ever have your nerd circle of friends, and then one of the nerds gets one of the popular kids gets interested in one of the nerds and invites that nerd over to the popular kids
Oh,
lunch table.
uh-huh.
I think that's what a lot of nerd culture has become. It became popular, and everyone got excited that it was popular, and then they realized when it becomes popular, it actually has to function in a way that popular media is typically expected to, which means it
Mm,
has to actually carry some sort of cultural zeitgeist burden, I
mm,
suppose, and does tend to it can alienate people. I mean, there's nothing new. I mean, it just feels like it's new today, but I don't think any generation has not experienced trends shifting one way or the other,
mm.
and picking up nerds from their lunch tables and putting them into the popular kids table, and watching that nerd suddenly act like a popular kid all of a sudden. What happened? I thought they were one of us, and now they're changing their
I
hairstyles
couldn't
and
agree more.
throwing away their glasses. But it's
uh,
natural. Like I don't know what you can do with that. I think that's again that's what like DIY writing and authorship and creative endeavors always keep you kind of on the cutting edge in two ways. I guess it always keeps you on the outer edge of what's popular,
mm,
but it also keeps you on the the leading edge where you can be more adaptive and you can actually engage people more efficiently and directly, and uh, you can do things that the popular kids can't do, that they're always
mm,
trying to figure out how to catch up to what we're doing.
mm.
So I think it's a nice place to be, especially if you have a day job. If you don't have a day job, maybe you need to figure out how to get on that popular kids table. But if you don't need it, yeah,
Mm.
and all three of those approaches can work in any whatever sort of readership or audience you're trying to attract. You don't
Right.
have to be trying to go the traditional publishing route to
Yeah, because
take any of those, which is
like
nice.
that was the interesting thing in like enormously respecting my sister's talent,
Yeah.
um, there was a background knowledge that she was interested in, um, tabletop hosting. She had done
Cool.
some like live games before, um, and there was also that musical interest. So there was always that idea. Well, maybe at some point this might lead you to a different artistic pursuit that maybe eclipses the others in a more robust way. Um, but
Oh, yeah,
uh,
sure.
that's kind of um, getting into that um, idea of uh, that you're on a creative journey and you want to um, you have this kind of hobby horse of like this is the type of uh, person that you want to please, and you might get into some or you might get into some uh, expressions of an artistic medium and be like, oh, I
Sure.
didn't expect that it would be this terrifying to go on a stage and actually perform these things that I like to listen to at home,
Yeah.
um, in front of
Yeah.
actual people. So there's kind of
Hmm.
um, that thing that I was kind of maybe anticipating that might happen. So I wanted to kind of give very generic examples of like personality traits um and it's also something interesting with you're also kind of trying to choose which technological partners you're making in terms of like Instagram is made for a certain type of thinker,
Mm.
and so you're thinking of that as a persona of your brand,
Yeah.
and so you want to kind of choose that as wisely as you can. Um,
Yeah. Great points.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's good for today. Um,
Yeah. That's a beefy one. Yeah. Um,
um,
Thankful in advance for anyone who checks this out later, because I think this is some content that I don't think is terribly common on
mm,
the internets, and it's something that I think increasingly people are asking for, and this kind of like uh, high interactivity, high impact kind of human touch social media that we have, especially with these live streams. That there's many ways you can get that sort of entertainment, but I
mm.
think this is kind of a cut above. At least this is the sort of thing I'd be gravitating towards. So anyone
Oh,
checking this out later, please give us a sub and a like and maybe a comment. And
yes, and
yeah,
remember you can follow me on uh, Twitter, and the first five that follow me, I'll follow
yeah,
you back and then DM you um, with just to get your email information and everything, and you can maybe be part of the Sync Spot beta along with Matt and I. Um, it's
great
been fun.
opportunity.
It's been fun looking at some of the stuff that's been being posted there. They have some content creators like Bishop Barron's one that I'm interested in. I've mentioned Paul C. Maxwell, um,
Hmm.
interesting, and Stephen Blackwood. I was just listening today to him talk to uh, I forget what his name is, but they were he was moderating a conversation about falsification uh,
Hmm.
and skepticism, um,
Hmm.
and it's been interesting to see that kind of robust discussion that is not anti spirituality, anti theist,
Yeah,
and that encourages you to have a more rigorous uh, worldview. Um, and yeah, so I'm excited to join you, those of you who are interested in following us there. Um, yeah, I think we're good. I'll
great.
talk to you after the stream, but for all of you else who are joining, um, thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah. See you guys later. Thanks.